This video will discuss murder and suicide, though not in detail. Please take that into consideration when deciding whether or not to watch it. Also, due to the subject matter, I will be pronouncing many names and terms from Japanese, a language I don't know very well, so I apologize now for any and all mispronunciations I make. Please check the captions for their spelling in case of confusion. And now, let us begin. Our story begins in Japan in the year 1701. For a century now, the Tokugawa family has ruled the country as shoguns, keeping the peace by carefully controlling everyone and everything, the samurai and their lords most of all. And yet, there remain tensions. Those same samurai and lords still compete with each other for power and glory. The emperor and his court are still the source of the shogun's legitimacy and must be kept happy, and the threat that someone might get ideas and start a rebellion always looms in the background, no doubt keeping many a government official up at night. And so, when the current shogun, Tokugawa Tsunayoshi of animal cruelty law fame, has to receive guests who come from the emperor, he does his best to make sure things go well. He finds two daimyo, Asano Naganori and Kame Korichika, who are in the capital that year and both from the far west of Japan, which makes them a pair of unimportant hicks who will be motivated to do their best at the job. After all, meeting the Emperor's men is the most important thing a couple of no-names from the middle of nowhere will ever do, and if they fail, both men and their families will suffer for it. If they mess things up, well, they were disposable to begin with. Still, the shogun does want things to go well, so he also gives Asano and Kame an etiquette teacher, Kira Yoshinaka, the shogun's own master of ceremonies. Kira and Asano do not get along at all. Kira feels that Asano hasn't given him enough for his trouble. Read, Kira wants bribes Asano refuses to give, and since Asano won't respect Kira, he returns the favor. Eventually, this gets to the point where Asano decides to attack Kira in the shogun's own home. As you might imagine, starting a fight in the shogun's house is a big crime, and so the very same day, Asano is compelled to commit seppuku, that is, ritual suicide, while the government dissolves his holdings and puts all his people out of a job. There's now a very large number of professional soldiers with no work, and Kira as an obvious target to take her frustrations out on. And so Asano's chamberlain, a samurai by the name of Oishi Yoshio, organizes a group of 46 other ex-Asano troops to get revenge on Kira or die trying. The plan is simple. Pretend to be spineless until Kira lets his guard down, then go to his house and take his head, so there'll be something to present to their lord's grave. You might notice that the plan is light on details for what to do after Kira's death. The 47 Ronin, as the group is usually called on account of becoming samurai with no lord, don't really expect to survive their assault on Kira, so there isn't much need to plan for afterwards in their minds. You might also notice that I said Oishi organized 46 other troops, not samurai. One of them wasn't a samurai at all. Terasaka Kichiemon was a commoner and a foot soldier, an elite kind of foot soldier known as an ashigaru to be specific, and he was brought in at the request of his boss Yoshida Chuzaimon, who was the group's second in command. Terasaka was Yoshida's personal scribe and his subordinate in general, so he probably wasn't loyal to Asano in the same way the others were. Which is all to say that Terasaka was in the group of 47, but he probably wasn't quite of it, like, say, Yoshida or Oishi were. This is important because Terasaka's story becomes one of the great question marks of the overall tale of the 47 Ronin. So for almost 2 years after the death of Asano, the 47 Ronin scatter to the four winds, meeting with each other only in secret and very rarely, while Oishi, as the most likely man to try and do something to avenge Asano, very publicly spends all his time getting drunk or visiting geishas to look the part of a broken man who won't do anything but drown his sorrows. Meanwhile, the other 46 find jobs as artisans and merchants. commoner jobs that samurai wouldn't touch because of the stain on their honor, all to keep Kira from getting suspicious. Eventually, the 47 come to the conclusion that Kira's dropped his guard, and on a cold winter morning in 1702 or 3. The traditional Japanese calendar doesn't line up neatly with the modern-day Gregorian calendar, and I've seen different opinions on what the equivalent date is. The Kira mansion in Edo wakes up to 47 angry soldiers beating down their doors. After a battle with Kira's retainers, the Ronin claim his head and take it to Senkakuji Temple, where Asano is buried. From there, Yoshida, along with one Tomimori Tsukeimon, go to the authorities to surrender the group into custody. 47 had already made their actions pretty public by putting a message to the effect of "This is who we are and what we're after" in Kira's house, and it had everyone's names on it, so escaping the long arm of the law wasn't going to happen anyway. That message was even copied out for the inspectors Yoshida and Tomimori talked, so the group definitely wasn't trying to hide anything, except that they were. When the inspectors went to Senkakuji, they expected to arrest 45 people there. We know this because they had drawn up custody plans in advance that split the Ronin into 3 groups of 10 and 1 group of 17. But when the inspectors got to Senkakuji, they only arrested 44 men. Terasaka Kichiemon was nowhere to be found. During the initial interrogation, Yoshida said that Terasaka had stayed with the group up to the gates of Kira's house, but disappeared. You can imagine how suspicious people were of that even at the time. After all, Terasaka had been allowed to join the group in the first place. Why would they let someone in who'd up and leave on them right at the end? And during the month and a half between the 46's capture and their final sentence, which was the same as their lord's, being compelled to commit seppuku, Yoshida sent a letter to his son-in-law asking him to look out for Terasaka, which he did. After everything, Terasaka ended up working for his former master's son-in-law and didn't do much else that shows up in the historical record, besides dying in his 80s. This did not stop anyone from spinning stories of what he did post-Kira. The usual story about what Terasaka did once Kira was dead is that Oishi and or Yoshida sent him west to where the 47's families lived to let them know they'd succeeded. In particular, Asano Daigaku, the younger brother of the man this was all about, was to be told what had happened. After doing that, Terasaka went back to Edo to turn himself in for the same crimes as his compatriots and request the same sentence they'd gotten. The chief inspector declined that request. Terasaka wasn't a samurai after all. He couldn't be punished the same as a samurai, or things just wouldn't be proper. Instead, the chief inspector got Terasaka a job tending the graves of his 46 comrades. From there, Terasaka lived out his life away from the public eye, and that was that. This story does explain pretty conveniently why Terasaka wasn't arrested with the others, and why they'd pretend he hadn't participated in the battle. After all, a mission like that would need to be kept secret so that the government didn't try to punish anyone but the Ronin themselves. The shogun's government was a firm believer in guilt by association, and if it was known that the Ronin had sent a message to anyone, that anyone would probably be executed. Of course, that's also why the story of the secret mission is probably not what happened. Oishi is known to have made sure Asano Daigaku didn't know what the Ronin had planned, specifically because it wouldn't end well for him if the government caught on to their plans and found out that anyone had aided or abetted them. Trying to avenge your lord and getting his brother killed in the process is the definition of counterproductive. There wouldn't be a reason to send any messages to anybody until the group could be sure they were the only ones getting punished. And indeed, the 46 arrested Ronin did send letters to family and friends once they'd given themselves up, and made it clear they were the ones to punish. For example, Oishi sent a letter to a doctor he knew that actually mentions Terasaka, though it's still the line about him disappearing before the fight, only with the mention that since Terasaka was a commoner, it didn't really matter what he did. That may have been true as far as the elite samurai and lords were concerned, but for other commoners, what Terasaka did was something they wanted to know. And once it was safe to talk about the whole incident, playwrights delivered. Stories adapting the tale of the 47 Ronin are practically a cottage industry in Japan, and that started as early as 1710, once everyone involved in the incident who was still alive, so the family and friends of the 47, as well as Asano Daigaku, had been pardoned and restored to honorable status. This started out with plays that had to change a lot of the identifying details because it was outright illegal back then to discuss current affairs in public. Plays about the 47 Ronin would change the names of the Ronin and set the story far enough in the past that no one would get in trouble. And those plays had a lot of characters who were clearly meant to be Terasaka Kichimo. Some commoner would be allowed to join the group of noble warriors because he worked harder and smarter than the rest to prove his worth, and so he got a share of the glory due to the virtues that the middle-class people who watched those plays liked to think they had, regardless of the actual reasons for Terasaka being included. To be fair to those playwrights and their audiences, it's not like there were many other working-class heroes in early modern Japan, so let's not blame people for working with what they had. Still, there is the question of why Terasaka was sent off and had his involvement covered up. Remember how the goal of the 47 Ronin was to die with honor? They couldn't do that if it was 46 samurai and 1 Ashigaru. Claiming Terasaka as part of the group when they were facing execution would have looked bad, especially since a ton of the group was already pretty low down on the ladder for samurai, including an Ashigaru, a man who wasn't even a real samurai or loyal to Asano directly like the others on the list of culprits. It would have ruined the group's optics, and optics can make or break your honor. And so, as Terasaka himself recorded in his account of what happened after Kira was dead, as the 47 Ronin arrived at Sengakuji, he was told to stay out of the temple and go back home on the orders of Oishi and Yoshida, which he did, with nothing to show for his work but a copy of the group's declaration of intent. Once he'd made sure that the others had been arrested and not just executed on the spot, Terasaka went back west and returned to the obscurity he'd been born into. He only died about 50 years after the 47 had done their famous deeds, so maybe he heard about the plays that depicted a version of him and his comrades. Maybe he even got to watch one at some point, but that's the kind of thing I don't think anyone could prove happened. Still, I like to imagine that Terasaka Kichimo went to the grave knowing on some level that there were people out there who found him admirable not in spite of his low rank, but because of it. There are more stories about the 47 Ronin out there than anyone could count, and many of them have something to say about Terasaka Kichimon, but oftentimes they make him into a samurai in spirit so he can stand with the others as an equal. I don't think much of that kind of approach. He was one of the 47 because his boss had seen proof of his worth day after day for years, and he parted ways with the 47 because the others needed him gone so they could die with honor. Even when he did find glory, it was only a version of him created from people's speculation of what he was like. Still, at least his name is known, which is more than most common people of any time and place can say. And it's the fact that he has a story that can be told which made me so interested in Terasaka. Ordinary people are, well, ordinary. They don't show up much in history, which is usually written by and for the powerful. So when a man who very much didn't matter to anyone important has even a small part in one of the stories our country tells itself constantly, that's truly special. I think that's why the story of Terasaka's special secret mission was created. A special man needs to do special things. It just isn't right otherwise. As for me, I think helping to write one of the country's great stories is special enough as it is.